Hello everybody and welcome. I'm going to introduce the panel members today, and then I have come up with a selection of questions which hopefully allow us to have an informed and interesting debate. I've not asked them to stand up and give a, shall we say, a dialogue on the questions. I just wanted it to be ebb and flow and try and get the best out of it that we possibly can. So on the panel we have Ian Freshwater, who's the Project Director of Argent. We have Mark Whelan, who's a Chief Creative Officer at Havas. We have Natasha Friend, who is the Director of Camden Giving. And we have Monica Hundle, who is the Director of Innovation and Business at Central St Martin's. So thank you for coming today. I'm going to start off with the first questions, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw this out there so anyone who wants to answer it can. And if I don't get a hands up, then I shall go to whoever's not looking at me, basically. Okay, so what does a thriving urban community look like? Natasha.
I was looking at you, but
You was.
Equality of opportunity, I think, is a really key thing, and not just opportunity for work, but opportunity to be healthy and to be thriving. But there's also something about being able to share spaces where people can be coming together, and not just in community centres. And when all of the fancy, very wealthy-looking buildings that exist in an area aren't accessible to those that don't have wealth, that's not a thriving community. And it probably needs to be lots of different ways that you're able to let communities into your building. For example, I know that Argent hold a lot of trustee meetings for local charities in their building, and then that building becomes, Albert, his charity uses that building on, Sienna's mum, she works in there, and it starts to become a place that you feel you can go into anywhere. Yeah. They're all for you.
Mark, we was having a conversation earlier around how Havas are doing that. Do you want to expand on in terms of?
Yeah, so we're an advertising agency, a group of advertising companies, 24 in one building. So we don't have a sort of a civic space, if you like. We don't have a kind of a shared area. But what we try to do is host events and organisations in the space that we do have. So, for example, we have a charity organisation called Creative Mentors Network, which is about introducing young people who wouldn't normally come into advertising or marketing, consider that as a career, mentoring with people from our organisation. And we were so impressed that we moved them into our building. And there used to be an ad by Victor Cam said, I was so impressed I bought the company. So we were so impressed we said, come and live in our building. So they don't have that overhead anymore, and they're fantastic. So, I think we host meetings from your organisation. Yeah. And so we do that, and we have people in the organisation who want to do more, who are open. We've created what I believe is an internal community, which I think is the first step. People having a voice, hearing what they want to do and what change they want to bring. And then we're all ears, because we're out there trying to do little ad hoc things that we find, sponsoring a school, bringing a school in. So to somehow systemize that a bit more would be really great for us.
Ian, you've done a lot of work in terms of Argent. Obviously, you've been, developing for a long time now. How would you see it, thriving? What does it look like to you?
I think the really key things for me are two things, really. It's sort of diversity, that any space really reflects the diversity of its wider urban setting. And that's not just in terms of perhaps of communities of people, but also communities of interest, which I think in the 21st century is, there's more people communicating and coming together in lots of different ways over lots of different interests. I think as well, I think a key point is really that a community should be quite mixed, so it has a mix of different opportunities and uses in a space. So it's not just about offices that we've obviously spoken about and housing, but it's also about the sports facilities, green spaces, the education facilities, be that schools, universities. I think particularly here at King's Cross, the key's been to really reflect the inner London setting that it sits within. So it's not a gated community. It's not an estate that people wouldn't recognise. That it really reflects its wider urban setting, really.
Monica, we've done a lot of work with Central School of St Martin's and Somers Town. How would you add to what the panel's already said?
I think it's quite interesting because CSM has actually worked probably pretty much with everybody, or collaborating with everybody on the panel, which I think is quite symbolic in itself, because often we end up acting as that sort of creative glue between different organisations. I think just picking up on what's been said, I think a lot of concentration when you build a new place is on the physical infrastructure, but I think what we're all saying is that the social infrastructure, the stuff that binds people together around a sense of shared purpose, common interests, creating communities of purpose, and actually creating opportunities for people to actively participate, because I think the thing about a thriving community, as you say, it needs to be open, inclusive, but it needs to create opportunities for people to actively come together to do things. So I'd say active participation and creating the conditions for that are really important.
How do we ensure that the existing communities, I mean, it's fabulous to get new opportunities, new resources, and that there is such a plethora of resources now available around the King's Cross and some Summerstown and some Pancras area, but how do we make sure that we don't forget the existing community that are already there? Mark, how could you?
Well, things like this are a start, right? So for us, it's about what's the network that we can plug into, because we don't, you know, we work here, but very few of us live here directly in this area. So organisations like yours, and I said, Creative Mentors Network and schools, trying to find a network that we can somehow connect with, because we do want to make change, you know, and what can we offer? We can offer employment, we can offer counsel, we can offer, you know, we design logos, we can, you know, we can help in any way you possibly can, and there is no issue, there is a total desire from all the people that I work with to somehow help and somehow make change.
Natasha, how's Camden Giving? I think because a lot of stuff that you're doing is the glue that Monica mentioned earlier on. What are you doing, and how can we, you know, do more of that?
So we see our role very much as being bringing together the people that are working here and the people who are living here, who are sometimes coming together anyway, but not on enough scale, and there's too much difference between those two groups of people. So we bring them together for things like a live crowdfunding event where a group of local charities and people that live here and that are affected by the work their charity is doing are the best people to run that. That style of work. They know what they need more than a big charity parachuting down does. So we bring that group together with the people that work here and held a kind of crowdfunding event, and people funded them. We're also bringing together people by organising volunteers that work for the businesses here to come and do what they're being paid to do at small local charities, so that there's just lots of opportunities, and I suppose those are two of many ways that we're bringing people together. And the other thing we do is to really try and act on hard evidence and where there is need, so that when people are channeling resources, we can say that's the place you'll be most useful to give your volunteering, or your paid internships would be most valuable to this group of people.
I think the really interesting for me is also that you all have lots of employees, and there is still a big disconnect, and this one's not in the questions, so you can't look at your notes.
I don't have lots of employees.
How do we, because for me, a community, and I say this to the individuals that come in and use the community centres, the community is everyone that comes in, works, has something to do with that physical space, that community. How do we ensure that the people that reside there and the people that work there have that common belief that they're one community? How can we work towards that? Monica?
I think it goes back to that point that I made earlier around sort of having a common sense of purpose, because I think there are many communities, and communities can be formed around at many different levels. I guess we come at it very much from a sort of a human level, in the way that we would approach things at CSM. I think there's been a sense since we moved here, we were one of the first tenants on the site, so I still remember kind of walking through the rubble to get to the building. And I think there is a sort of perception, perhaps, of CSM as being quite a rarefied institution. 4,500 staff and students that we have who've sort of gone on to sort of shape the world around them, world famous. But I think when we arrived here, there was a real sense of how we might turn what we do inside out to sort of engage with the neighbourhoods around us, and I mean beyond the development that we actually reside in. There was a real sense of actually using the practice of what we do to get to know the local area, get beneath the skin of the local issues, and then use that understanding to inform how we work with people. And I think that point of sort of not reinventing the wheel, but actually understanding what's already going on the ground is really crucial, because it's about an exchange. It's not about us helping others. I think we've got as much to gain from the interaction with the neighbourhoods around us, and they enrich our learning and expertise as much as the way that we can share what we do. I think that sense of exchange is really important.
Would you think that that is something that's common among other businesses, though, Ian?
Well,
it's not such an easy thing. I accept that, because it's not the way everybody organisation is set up, that they can do that. They have a business, what they're trying to deliver. But is that something that's becoming more desired? What would you say on that?
I think it is. I mean, certainly in the sort of knowledge economy that we sit within, and indeed many of the businesses at King's Cross, have come to us and said, how can we get involved, be it via the likes of urban partners or other conduits to make things happen. I think for us, and really echoing what Monica's said, it's really very much about the human scale. That as you say, we've been involved at King's Cross since 2001, so for many, many years. But I think what's become clear with conversations with people, these consultation exercises you have to go through, but also in developing ideas, we've come to realise as sort of guardians of this space that actually working through knowledgeable local contacts and conduits really is the big difference. So the likes of the university at Camden Giving that we helped to establish, the Skip Garden, Global Generation Skip Garden on our site, I think that really brings really a human scale to both people wanting to access opportunities and gain knowledge, and businesses who want to proactively work in their area, which I think any sort of forward-thinking business in the 21st century should be looking to do, and gladly, I think the majority do currently.
But how do we make it easier for that to happen? Because I am very conscious, from the charity sector, that we sometimes operate in ways that doesn't actually help that either. So how can we as a charity sector, I say I'm representing the community that we're seeking to engage with, how can we make that easier? Is it that connector? Is it that brokerage? And how can we go about doing that, Mark?
Yeah, I'm in the communications business. It's literally communication.
Yeah.
So, I feel like there is a kind of a sort of an invisible wall between just after, what's the street called, the library on? Is it Mortimer Street? After the other side of St Pancras, basically. Midland, yeah. So, we've done things like we went to the local school nearby with STEAMco, which is a organisation trying to get young people into creativity and the arts, and we sponsored that event. So that was our attempt at outreach, but it was us going into community. I think companies have to address their own culture. Like, are you an open organisation? So we've recently hired a diversity and inclusion manager. Bacola, is she there? Oh, yeah. Hello. So we now have someone whose job it is to do this, rather than people doing it, in their spare time. We want it to be absolutely a central tenet. We want people to be proud to work for us as an organisation, and to be that we want to be diverse and inclusive. And so that includes both our internal employees, but also the way our employees engage with the outside community. So we're addressing that as a culture. We've got obviously a long way to go, but we're making those starts.
I think I think it's great that we don't always have an individual that is that one person that's doing that, so to speak. So I think what I would like to see come out of this is that, whether it's Urban Partners or someone else, that if lots of companies wanted to do something and they had an offer, so to speak, they could then let a group know that, and then there was somewhere you could go. Because otherwise what you quite often get is lots of companies all come in to offer the same thing, or we come to you vice versa, saying we would like the same thing. And I suspect Google is always inundated. Just top of my head there. So I think there is a gap there, I think, in, again, comms or somewhere to go that could assist that, because there are lots of great charities, lots of great things going on, but how you make those relationships that seems to be individual at the moment.
Yeah.
you make a connection with one person.
And we have people coming to us and say,
Yeah.
to senior management saying, what can we do? So
Yeah.
it's incumbent on us to find those opportunities for people. So, you know, again, we're all open for that. But I don't think we have at the moment, we have a system or a central conduit for that. So if we
Yeah.
can, then that'd be amazing.
We shall be. I hope that Camden Giving starts to become that thing. Yes, now feels like the moment to pounce.
Yes, pounce. Pounce away.
So where we've been able to see lots of businesses across the borough say that they're concerned about youth safety, we're starting to pull together funding to look at that, and where we're able to see a business that's concerned about youth safety and they have money to give, and a business that's concerned about youth safety and they have volunteers to give, we can pull that together. We can be that in-between thing. I think to get to that point that you're ready to do that, you have to be really honest as a business about the thing that's hard for you to do. So if that might be that you have a lack of public trust, or you can't give money, or you can't give volunteering because your staff culture doesn't allow for it. I suppose organisations like Camden Giving, and we're not the only one, there's Heart of the City and other brilliant organisations that can kind of convene businesses that want to support. I think there's a need for some empathy on both sides of the partnership, and to kind of really know how gutting it is for a charity to be told no by a business. And I think the charity sector need to know that businesses, people that work for businesses are also really busy and have difficult and challenging things they've got going on as well.
Yes, I think that if you had that funnel, something that, you know, coalesced that, then I think it would be more productive relationships and less negative responses come out of that.
But what you said was great about it, because I think what we're looking for is, it's not just a financial transaction, right?
No.
Obviously, we understand that that's part of the deal, but all of our people want to have a human interaction. So every time we have done any volunteering, or we've had primary schools coming in, you know, the transformational effect it has on people, and the pride in the workplace, and things like today. I did something, you know, as well as doing an advert about rice, I also met some kids, you know. So if we can bring those two things together, then that for us is absolutely the sweet spot as a business.
I think quite often there is a misconception that charities just want money.
That's right.
I think, you know, for a lot of organisations like mine, you know, my IT is out of the arc. It should be in the Science Museum. Logo and branding and comms are something that I Google, quite frankly, to find out how to do them. So I think quite often there are things that, if there was a mechanism where we can access people that are interested in giving a couple of hours of their time, it's not always about money, but I think a lot of businesses and a lot of charities are going under that misconception. That's the only way to go.
But we've just done that. So for the Harrow Club and W10, just redesigned their website, done all their photography, and these are all people volunteering, doing it in their spare time because they want to help. So
I mean,
let's talk.
It's a bonus for your organisation, because your employees feel great at the end of the day and work about it. So that leads on to one of my final questions. We're all doing amazing things quite, you know, often, but we're all on different buses. So how do we all get on the same bus to actually deliver things that are more impactful and more sustainable in the long term? Is it this, so we have this single connection? How do we do that better?
So obviously I think collaboration is a good thing. That's why I work for Camden Giving. I do sort of think sometimes we don't always need to collaborate for everything. There are times when just doing something is enough, and it's nice to go through your Instagram feed at Diwali and see like so many Diwali parties happening, and no one got together and said, well, let's all do a massive Camden Diwali party. They happened independently and they had their own spirit and they served other people. But when there's a problem that is more complex, well, Diwali isn't a problem, but when there's a problem that is more complex, like homelessness, it does need lots of heads coming at it in different ways. And I think, again, that being honest about what you're able to do, what your piece of that puzzle is, and then somebody holding that relationship in the middle. In the case of homelessness, I know you're doing similar things. That's it.
Monica, how would you?
Yeah, I think that homelessness project is a really good example of kind of a process that's emerged here in King's Cross, because we've got some of these convening networks now, like the Knowledge Quarter and Urban Partners, that are helping to bring people together. And also Camden Council is looking to sort of shift its role from being provider of services to an enabler, and we've been working with them through a strategic partnership project called the Public Collaboration Lab, which is about sort of marrying their operational objectives of what we do, which is sort of teach and educate, and our educational objectives. But what it's been is a sort of a focus point for bringing many different partners together around issues of concern. So the homeless project that we've worked on together with yourself has involved urban partners. It's involved a whole host of other charities that are focused in that area, local businesses, other academic institutions. So I think perhaps clarity around what some of those grand challenges are in the local area, and actually bringing these networks together, because these issues are very intractable and complex, and they require us to join our assets and expertise. No one person has got the solution. It's about how we come together to share that expertise and assets, because collectively we can do more. And it requires a long-term approach. I think commitment is another really key point here.
I think the homeless project that we're alluding to here is a really interesting one, and how that came about was because, quite frankly, it's a shame of our time, and we are trying to do something about it. So we will having conversations, and I say we, you know, with CSM, Francis Crick, the British Library, urban partners, to do, so I'm not saying what we could do, and we come up with this approach called the realisation of assets model, which is sort of what we're talking about today. It is about, okay, what asset do you have that you can bring to the party in terms of trying to be whether it's providing space in terms of accommodation and beds, whether it's providing access to welfare and benefit guidance and training and employment, health, the whole lot. And the amazing thing about this event is I've never seen so many sectors coming together with one common aim. So maybe it is around trying to come up with some common aims that we can all collectively work together, because, as I say, this piece of work has been insanely brilliant. I mean, CSM are working with the London College of Communication to do a piece of research on the barriers to homelessness, and that's amazing.
Well, I think what design can often do is take what is a very complex issue and firstly visualize it and sort of simplify and synthesize what's going on. So this point of lots of different providers, the fact that you can then visualize it on a map enables different stakeholders to come round a table and just understand what's going on. And often it is then enabling that communication, and once you understand what the issues are, you can then start to look at how you might unpack them and address them and kind of co-create these solutions, bringing these different assets together.
I think as well, I mean, if I take Argent as a business, for example, so we've been in the area since 2013, and obviously we have our core work that we do. Additionally to that, as a kind of corporate approach, all of our staff have volunteering time allocated per year, and we have corporate charity partners and different projects we undertake. I mean, then sort of one step further, we're members of Urban Partners. Urban Partners, in turn, some of the members there are members of the Knowledge Quarter. And sort of, you know, that's just the business side, and not least, there are many, many more businesses still to come at King's Cross, which is still being built until 2022. I think, and from the charity side, it must be very much the same. There's the core work, there's the need for resource or time or support from the potential from these businesses. I kind of feel on a micro level, it's a bit like, where's the portal, where's the place that brings this all together, where someone could simply say, I need a volunteer, or I want to volunteer my time, or we'd like to do a project in this area, or, I mean, you've mentioned, obviously, Natasha, about people having time in our building, that, you know, just here's some space that we can offer up for free, and I'm certain across the businesses, there's always that opportunity, but it's a bit like, actually, how do people tap into that? Where is the space that people simply access that stuff? Because I think all of us individually have websites with a wealth of information, etc., but it's quite a lot for any charity to go through. So it's a bit like, actually, where do you simply get that information about what's out there?
I think it's also nice to have an equal relationship I think what you tend to find when you head up charitable organisations, that hitherto now, what we find is that the relationship is more the squire and peasant model, maybe I shouldn't say that, but I have, rather than the equal model. So I think, by having a connection whereby you can connect like-minded individuals, like-minded requirements together, but it must be on an equal footing. Sorry, I thought I'd get in there, Natasha. Your turn.
No. Oh, no. Sometimes the power dynamic is wrong in a business-charity relationship, and I've sat on both sides. So I've sat for longer on the business side than I have on the charity side. It's sometimes not comfortable, but also charities need to be really honest about what they need and really honest about what they're asking for, and get away from sort of saying £10 pays for this sort of thing, and talk to businesses about the complexities of running a charity, and explain you don't know how you're going to pay the rent, but you find it really easy to pay for the cakes that you give at your tea party, because everyone wants to buy your cakes, and kind of being open and honest and trusting other people that they will be all right with the realities of that, I think is important.
We're incredibly bad at it as charities, I think. And I think that over the past, 5 years, there's been a bit of bad press in relation to charity. So I think, people have some strange perceptions of charities. But I think keeping the lights on is very tough at the moment. Especially when you consider local authority funding is going. So I think what we need to do is how we communicate with you, I think, as businesses in a more effective way and in a manner which you will understand. And maybe in itself, that's something we could require help on. If we're taking something almost like if you're going to Dragon's Den but what a pitch, okay, how would you expect to see that? What is you're going to respond to from a different position? Monica?
Yeah, I think also just building that sense of resilience and sort of working together in a way that is going to lead to some sort of legacy that can be owned by the people who can take ownership of it's really important, and trying to think about that from the outset. Sort of also being open to sort of some experimentation and risk in all of this as well. I think we're sort of sitting in an incredibly rich place. Yes, it is surrounded by sort of communities who are, I guess, some of the most disadvantaged in the country, really deep-seated long-term issues, but we've got an embarrassment of riches on our doorstep, and how you sort of mobilize that together, but also work in a way that enables those communities and organizations such as yourselves to be involved in the process, but then own it and sustain it, I think is important. And that will require kind of new ways of working that perhaps we haven't figured out yet. But it's sort of trusting in the process and also kind of investing in projects that allow that to happen. Because I think we've got a really great opportunity here for this to be a great knowledge quarter. It's now being called an innovation district, one of the 6 in the country, but I think it could be an amazing social innovation park, actually, a great way to, what's the point of having all of this and living on the doorstep if you don't feel that you can get a job at Google or come and study at CSM? I mean, I think personally our institution has a way to go on that. We should be attracting more students from the surrounding neighbourhood.
Talking about risk, there is a piece of work we're doing with the British Library and yourself and the Skip Garden on the meanwhile use. Yeah. That's probably as risky as it gets in terms of innovation. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, we've been building, just this week actually, we've worked long-term relationship with the Skip Garden and Global Generation, who are also supported by Argent and Camden Giving, and we've just, out of the work that we've been doing with them, created a community kiln, which will be a great example of bringing, people from Havas and Argent and people who live in the area can come together and do workshops there. But we've now, off the back of that relationship, partnering with Global Generation on a meanwhile garden, which is going to be situated between the British Library and the Crick. And we're proposing to create a Makespace creative studio in that garden, really as an opportunity, again, to start doing some of the projects that we've been working on that can often be quite complicated to explain So it sounds quite humble having a creative studio in a garden, but I think the informality of that is quite significant because often local people can feel quite intimidated still coming into places like CSM or Havas. I think coming into the backyard of the British Library and the Crick will feel a bit more like a public living room.
Yeah.
And what we want to do there is do collaborative projects with local partners and people around some of the issues that we've been talking about. So yeah, open for discussions if anyone's keen to get involved and support that.
I think the thing I like about that is when we first started, having the business working group of the Neighbourhood Forum, and we talked about communication and how people were doing amazing things, but no one else knew what and everyone else was doing. But one of the key things that came out of that was to ensure that the community benefited from things coming on down the line and, from opportunities. So to have a makerspace, it's not in CSM, it's not in the BL, it's actually in their community. And it's going to be owned by them. We are going to be working with CSM students and with academics to actually build it. And if anyone has a hammer and a tool and would like to come and help, please do. But the idea is it's bringing it out to them. There's no barriers. There's no it's us and them. It's all everyone hands on deck, and it's cheek by jowl with a garden that will be producing vegetables and fresh fruit in a community that has massive issues in terms of health deprivation. But that is where the community can really see when things do work. And I think that's a really mutual relationship there.
And I think, and also just opportunities for sort of upskilling.
Yeah.
Because I think often through these projects, it's as much about the journey that you go on as well as the outcome that gets created and the learning that happens within that. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity for us to learn from one another and upskill, but then also social enterprises might come out of that. That then links in with the Living Centre and the Job Hub. It's this thing of joining things up. I think there are going to be jobs that we don't even know what they're going to be yet in the future. So actually how we upskill young people in the area, raise that sense of aspiration, and going back to that agenda around STEAM, again, given the partners that we've got within King's Cross, and how you bring sort of science and technology and the arts together to enrich curriculum and kind of build future skills that are going to be needed for the kind of future economy is going to become really important, and creativity and collaboration we know are going to be two key critical skills in that.
Yeah, and I think it then builds into a legacy over the other side of the Euston station. So it's actually, a much long-term plan that the community can really buy into. I'm thinking we should open it out to questions in the audience. Should we? How do we do that? I can't see you all, I've got to say. The light's shining right in my eyeballs.
Oh no, there were people here, I didn't know.
It did begin to feel like a conversation.
They just said go through this door, didn't they? We didn't know where he was going. So open to questions. All very quiet. What do people think of what's been said today? Sorry.
Thank you. Well, I think it's just fantastic to hear about this, what is happening in terms of collaboration and the will to collaborate. Oh, by the way, my name's Alan Murphy. I'm from a primary school called Netley Primary School, tucked away just behind Warren Street. We've just had some air quality audits carried out. There was a kind of Mayor of London thing a year ago, but we've also just had a really generous donation from a Swedish company called Blue Air. I'm going to give them a plug because they've given us £5,000 worth of air purifiers free, and they've also carried out an audit. Now, our main school building is in an old Victorian building, and the really shocking levels of the PM 2.5s and 10s they found there as well. On average, between about 2 and 5 times the World Health Organization limits. So that's one of the main reasons I've come along today, because I'm leading in the school about trying to mitigate the effects of the air quality issues now, but also to what we can do to contribute to the debate about reducing it in the environment generally. One of my thoughts is, because it sounds like lots of great things are happening here locally, so this is a destination itself where people work, where people live, etc., and also lots of people pass through. And probably the people who work here pass through Marylebone, say, along the Euston Road and things like that. So what role do you think this kind of organisation has in terms of mitigating against the effects of air pollution, but also do we have a role here? Because I think, I bet you actually, if lots of people work here, if you took air quality readings in your buildings, they would be quite shocking. So what's our role in terms of what can we do to mitigate the effects, and what can we do to contribute to the debate, to the move to actually reduce of the likes that was it Mark was speaking about earlier? Sorry, Dr. Will was, beg your pardon. Yeah.
Is that for anyone in particular, or is it an open? Does anyone want to answer that? Ian?
I think, I mean, certainly collectively, Urban Partners as a business network has lobbied TfL and the GLA and others and Camden for some time around, we inputted into the King's Cross Gyratory and potential changes. I think one of the main projects that we've supported has been our Wellbeing Walk, which is the walk to try and take employees away from the Euston Road, whilst hopefully those things get changed and we continue to lobby that. And obviously the Wellbeing Walk is the walk through Somerstown from St Pancras through to Euston, which we've led on things like a signage and promotion of that route, and hopefully we can see in the future that being more formalised into a much more recognised way to get from A to B between these stations with perhaps without having to encounter the Euston Road. Now, obviously, it seems a bit daft to say, well, you shouldn't go near to this road because it's acknowledged as being terribly polluted. And I think what we'll continue to do is to really push and lobby for major changes to the Euston Road. I would imagine it will be a bit of a long-term project for us. So I think really, certainly for us as a network, it's been about both lobbying and then active changes to the area that hopefully can then be formalised in the future.
Anyone else like to add something to that?
Well, in our employee behaviour, so we have a cycle to work initiatives which subsidise people buying bicycles, and we provide showers. And that was part when we were planning the building, because obviously we have incredibly good public transport access where we are. So I don't think anybody drives to work. Very few people get taxis. But just on our level of the 2,000 people are in the building, very much encouraged to cycle in, and that's subsidised.
Monica, anything from CSN?
I mean, again, sort of the thing about the Wellbeing Walk and encouraging cycling, obviously, using more sustainable forms of getting around also has that benefit of bringing to life bits of the city that perhaps don't get walked through, and supporting, I guess, some of the sort of local economy that exists on some of those back streets. But I know that through some recent conversations that have been happening through the Knowledge Quarter, who've just gone through this process of doing a science and innovation audit, that there are sort of 4 areas of focus that are going to emerge from that. And one of them is about developing a vision for 2050 within the local area. And there was some discussion around identifying some key grand challenges for the local area. And actually, interestingly, Euston Road was cited as one. What if everybody came together to imagine what some solutions to that could be? So Camden Council are leading on the sort of that visioning process. So I would sort of, encourage, that you get in touch, because I think that's something, again, that we could collectively sort of agree on.
I know the Somerstown Neighbourhood Forum is doing a huge amount of work in terms of the air quality, and they're working with UCL. So I know a lot is going on, but it is comforting to hear that the businesses are equally trying to lend their voice and encourage their staff to, change their, how they get to work, etc. Is that okay? Any other questions?
Is it me? Thank you. I think Monica's comments really resonated, because I think there was something in what she was saying about the long term and raising people's eyes. So the people in the area that we need to help, we shouldn't be just dropping in to help them. We shouldn't be just dropping things off. And I think Monica's comments about actually the embarrassment of riches and of making things that are long term is absolutely critical. So thank you for those. I think those are absolutely pivotal and should be central to what we do. It's not about us feeling good. It should be actually about us actually giving selflessly and creating long-standing changes. Part of that, and it was interesting to think back on one of the things Mark said he'd done and also that Sarah reflected on, is around technology. You guys have talked about technology a lot, both in terms of the charities themselves needing it, but I think also in terms of the people that we're trying to help. Technology exclusion is probably one of the things now that in the race to put everything online, if you're homeless, if you need to access benefits, if you need to access education, if you're actually one of the kids in a youth club, without that technology, without that ability to access all of the things that are there, we talked about going to the website and knowing where on the website. Well, step one of that is actually being able to get to a website. So I think one of the key foundational things, building on what Monica said we can do, is to actually get technology out to more people. Now, one of the fascinating things about this is actually, as businesses, we replace our technology, our laptops and our desktops, about every 3 to 4 years. And we do that because for the sort of needs of most businesses, they're defunct at that point. And then we all pay money to get them all sent off to landfill. And actually, within the borough, there is a social divide where so many of the kids that are here don't actually have access to this. People can say there's libraries and youth clubs, but they're not always the easiest places to go to. So I think one of the initiatives, building on again, I think the Monica's point about social enterprises, would be, I think there's an opportunity to actually take all of the technology equipment that we generate between us and actually start to put a social enterprise in place to actually then re-kit that out with something ambitious. And I think one of the things that I'd encourage people to do is to be ambitious. Why shouldn't every poor kid, and by poor, it's not meant to be pejorative, do your definition of whatever you want, but why shouldn't we give everybody in Camden a laptop? Between our businesses, there's about 20,000 kids in Camden between the sort of ages of 11 onwards. We've got enough laptops being generated over 1 or 2 years to give every single one of those a laptop and enable them to actually start raising their eyes. Because I don't want people just brought in the buildings to see how the other people live. I want them, exactly as Monica said, to come in and go, actually, I can aspire to this. This could be me in this job. We're not another class of people. I'm certainly not. But I think that's one of the things that I'd like to encourage about how we work together to achieve something ambitious to that scale. That's it.
Thank you.
Oh, can I talk? Is that on? Can everyone hear me? That's
Yep.
it. Brilliant. Okay, my name's Steve Griffith. I'm from Copenhagen Youth Project, which is actually on the other side of the development, the York Way side. So please don't forget, it is Islington, but we're still there. And thanks to, I forget his name there, who just spoke, we've got an amazing setup in our project of a network to our music studio, which is quite amazing. So they've done a great job in our project already. But my point that I wanted to make was really that we've made a lot of connections with businesses over the 18 years I've been there to ensure that we do try and utilise the opportunities within the development. I can mention Havas and Ted Baker as 2 great examples of how we should be working moving forward with community groups. But my concern is more about local people. The Fountains is a brilliant example of a piece of land that works really well. On a lovely day, you can see how that takes place. But there is a barrier. There's no doubt there's a barrier. And I think what we need to be thinking about is how we communicate, which was mentioned earlier, with the community on both sides of the development. We don't receive the newsletter, for example. We don't receive information about what's going on in the development on a weekly basis. And I think that needs to be sort of looked at and improved. People do ask, what is that big building, which is Central St Mines? People do say, it's not for us, which is the new bit that's just opened. So I think we need to do a lot of work to bring people in, and we need to take some risk. I loved some of the work that's gone on so far, the concerts that have taken place, but is it really accessible? And I think we need to think about how accessible are the things that are being put on. That's it.
Ian, Monica, do you want to respond to that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think. I mean, perhaps going back to my earlier point about those portals or those places, where do we actually put information so that it's reaching as many people as possible? I think we're quite proud of what we've done so far at King's Cross in terms of, certainly last year, for example, we had 163 events, and around about half of those were free for people to access and engage with. We have things like our sports hall that's free to use and book, and a whole range of different activities. We have a recruitment centre that's fast approaching 1,000 people into work since 2014. So I think there's points of engagement and successes, but really, yeah, truly, how does this become part of the city? As I mentioned at the beginning, is our aspiration in terms of communities. And I think for that to work, I think it's about actually what's the legacy kind of post-construction. There's been, as you've said, all manner of buildings open up, universities, the schools, new homes, retail, etc. But actually, I think our focus for the next coming 5 years or so, until the end of construction in 2022, is actually how do we, once we have a kind of full capacity of everything's built, everyone's living there, this is actually part of the city, how can we engage as many people as possible? So I think for us, it's to reflect on how we communicate, how we inform people as to what's going on, and also really to lay out those opportunities that are there. I think part of that, though, as I say, as we move towards a fully developed place, it becomes a bit more incumbent on us to say, actually, we're going to step back, we've built this, how do we actually now engage businesses and residents together to grow projects that they've devised together, that they have empowerment and ownership over? I don't think it's for us to decide, say, you know, in 5 years' time, what Business A wants to do locally with the community. I think, like any part of London, that should happen more organically, hopefully with our help and the help with urban partners and the likes of Camden and Gibbon and others that are here.
I think there is always going to be a challenge around communication. I think we're never going to get it right. I know personally from my own organisation, we send out community researchers who door knock, we hold events, we have flyers, and we still miss people. So I think, but if there are any ideas that you have where we could learn from them or improve, I think that would be greatly received. And definitely, I think it's also always something we can improve on.
I'd just like to say one thing. Just in
I thought you might.
Because there is a lot going on. I totally agree with you. I think we're not as accessible as we should be. I think it kind of is a bit depressing, actually, that kids will come and play in the fountain or families will come, yet they don't feel comfortable to cross the threshold, and we need to get better at inviting them in. But we are trying to sort of embed that consideration around the local and community in everything that we do. So there was that project that we've just discussed about the Meanwhile Garden. We actually prototyped that in our Letherby Gallery this summer and actually opened up the doors so that people could just come in and participate. But one of the other things that's going on at the moment that would be worth sort of sharing is that Camden applied to be London Borough of Culture. They didn't win the overall prize, but they got a runner-up prize, and they're running a project over the coming 18 months called Camden Alive, which is targeting 10 social housing estates across the borough, in particular because I think they're really keen to ensure that the communities that are often kind of feel excluded from mainstream cultural provision do have an opportunity to participate. So perhaps that could be an opportunity to have a conversation and a dialogue. We're working with them to kind of support some of that engagement in those estates on the ground. It's proving very challenging. But that could be a great opportunity, because I think when things happen in Granary Square, I think you're right. Often people feel that, and it's not to knock what's going on, I think some of it is great, but I think there's a real opportunity that we could be working with the neighbouring communities to create the content and the ideas that actually then takes place in somewhere like Granary Square. So actually how you co-produce the content and bring it to life in those settings is something that we could definitely look to do through these sorts of projects.
I think it's also about building confidence in the communities themselves, that they feel they can participate. I think that's where the charities come in. I think it's how we support the communities we work with to feel that the CSM is for them. Why the hell is it not? You know, the BL is for them. Why the hell is it not? So I think that's where we can come in a little bit more and go from there. I think we have time for one more question. Lady in the middle.
Does this come on? Ah, brilliant, thank you. It's just really more of understanding. You've mentioned the Knowledge Quarter, and obviously we've talked a lot about urban partners. I'm slightly confused about how the two differ in terms of purpose and aims, and how they link up into one, what we've called a unified action plan. And should big organisations potentially be a member of both?
Ooh. Well, I mean, I sit on the Knowledge Quarter. I'm the chair of the community engagement group from the Knowledge Quarter. And I think the Knowledge Quarter is largely, if I can get this right, it's about 98 organisations who are knowledge purveyors, shall we say, or knowledge institutions. And they're reviewing their mission at the moment. But they're obviously largely about knowledge and increasing access to knowledge, coming together in terms of it is around education and the communities that they sit in and they reside in, but they're reviewing their overall aims, objectives at the moment. From the business side of things, I'm not so, in terms of urban partners, I should imagine it's pretty similar, but obviously from a business perspective.
Yeah, I suppose that urban partners are far more, perhaps more traditional commercial companies, so High Speed One or Eurostar, Great Northern Hotel, some of the different hotels around. I mean, for ourselves, our focus is very much on lobbying for the area and benefits to the area, benefiting our employees and the next generation, so young people in the area. Whereas I think Knowledge Quarter, and I wouldn't want to speak solely for them, is focused on that knowledge share and innovation. I think where there is real close crossover, and we should perhaps do more as the Knowledge Quarter develops, is on that community focus, both in terms of the physical public realm. I've mentioned the Wellbeing Walk, and obviously there's other projects being considered or have been considered. And I think it's also fundamentally, and it comes back to that point, how do we come together to share the information about what these companies do, what's accessible, you know, how people can access the benefits and opportunities that we may bring. So perhaps more to do there, and apologies if I've misrepresented the Knowledge Quarter, but that's roughly.
I think there's a lot of synergy, and I think there is a lot of coming together, but it needs to be more, perhaps not formalised, but it needs to be more cohesive in terms of some sort of strategy. But I think there is a lot of commonality between the things that we're trying to achieve.
I think there's a lot of overlap between the aims of both groups, and there are opportunities. And I think the homelessness project, which you mentioned earlier, is probably one of the first that has brought the two groups together. But more work like that would make sense, because often I think similar conversations are probably going on across both networks. So it's not to say that we have to do everything together, because I think there's a value in allowing people to still continue to do their own thing, but around certain core challenges, it would make sense to join up.
I'm seeing the countdown flash at us from the bottom, which I think tells us we're done. Thank you ever so much for coming, and hopefully that was interesting with a bit of insightfulness in there, and thank you very much.